Chapter 580, Sudden Winds of Change. For the Zhao family, this abrupt news was akin to having the sky just fall straight down on their heads. This was especially so since their 450,000 strong army was out on a campaign. They were the elite forces of the Zhao family and their hand for world domination. While they had similar forces of that size around the northeastern regions, they were too scattered, and to form them into a huge army was not something that could be done in a short time. As for their strongest ally, the above heavens, they had also sent out a good half of their experts to coordinate with the Zhao family. The Zhao family was already public enemy number one, and the loss of their entire logistics supply line would have consequences beyond their imagination. Could it be that their ancestors' sayings were true? If the Zhao family focuses just on commerce, then it will remain for many eras to come. However, if their ambitions grow too wild, and they attempt to obtain dominance, then the entire clan would die without a grave to be buried in. When the Zhao family head, Zhao Fenghan, heard this piece of news, he immediately vomited at a mouthful of flood and fainted. If the sky dies, so will I. After a series of medical treatments, the resuscitated Zhao Fenghan immediately gave down a series of commands as though he had gone crazy. No matter the price, no matter what, they had to clear the river channel in the fastest time possible. In addition, they were to organize troops to pass through the water to reinforce and provide supplies to the other side, or else their army outside would surely perish. This was undoubtedly the best idea. But this best idea was just merely wildly searching for a random doctor to treat one's illness. For a country that was mostly comprised of flatlands, how many ships could they actually have? Furthermore, even if they could gather up the necessary members to form a crew, they could not operate the boats. While the water level right now was already on the level of a calamity, it still was not deep enough for actual ships to travel. Although the water level had increased by more than 2 meters, which they considered a disaster, it was not even enough for a tiny ship to float, let alone a battleship that could hold hundreds of people. All the various Zhao family members who looked like they had lost their souls immediately started to remember the sayings of their ancestors. A thought rose unbidden in the minds of everyone's heart: A is the beginning of the end of the Zhao family. As for the complete opposite of the Zhao family, that was the Ling family. Upon receiving the tentative plan from Ling Tian, Meng Liji immediately understood the intentions behind Ling Tian's plan. Initially, no matter how confident Meng Liji was in Ling Tian, he still did not dare to fully believe he was able to cover the rains and overturn the clouds. After checking multiple times with another person he respected, Miss Li Zhu, he finally took action. However, he did not strictly adhere to Ling Tian's instructions in the plan, for Miss Li Zhu's suggestions had increased the scope of Ling Tian's plan by more than 2 times. As someone belonging to the school of diplomacy in the military, Meng Liji was, of course, aware of the hidden meaning behind such a matter. If Ling Tian really managed to block the Blue Jade River, then the commotion it would cause as well as the benefits that the Ling family could reap were clearly known by him. As such, he gave out the highest level command available in the Ling family courtyard, that other than the hidden cards inside the west and north that were not to be activated, the rest of the hidden cards that Ling Tian possessed would now be put onto the playing field. All were to gather and ceaselessly flow towards the east, on the side of sky bearing. They left a small portion of guards and soldiers for Ling Chen to hold the fort. Meng Liji then gathered another 100,000 troops and war horses, as well as pulling out 10,000 people from the Violent Wind gang before bringing the army out for the expedition, led by him personally. Li Zhu served as his hidden guard, and together they rushed towards the southeast. This time, Meng Liji intended to not only totally swallow the 450,000 elite troops of the Zhao family, but also to unify eastern Zhou and southern Jing. If it was possible, he would even slaughter his way into the lands of the Zhao family that they had held for centuries. Meng Liji's thinking was even more extreme than Ling Tian himself. The Ling family courtyard also sent down the highest order towards Ling Zhao's troops, commanding them to take down the Golden Jade City within 5 days. They believed that Ling Zhao, having the advantage, would not find it a difficult task. Once southern Jing was taken down, they could trap another group of soldiers from the Zhao family outside of southern Jing. Through harassing them, be it poison, arson or attacking, They had to ensure that all their logistic support was destroyed. As time passed and their food and supplies dwindled, the army would also begin to panic. However, Ming Lige did not know that he had actually sent out the command a little late. Just as he had sent down the command, Grand Marshal Ling Zhao had already taken down Golden Jade City, confronting the 150,000 Zhao family soldiers head-on. It was likely that war would be the first to break out over there. As for Shen Ruhu's side, Ming Lige strictly commanded him to retract his attitude of an observer, mobilize his army, and cooperate with Dongfeng Jinglei to arrange a pincer attack. They had to ensure that the Eastern Zhao Imperial soldiers, as well as the other 150,000 troops of the Zhao family, were firmly trapped. Ming Lige's intention was to deal with the important matters first. Nothing could surpass swallowing up the 150,000 soldiers stationed in the middle of Fingyang. Any other matters could be pushed aside for now. Just one day after the troops set off, Ming Lige received the good news from Ling Tian. The Blue Jade River had been successfully cut off and Ling Tian was already making haste towards Eastern Zhao to assist Shen Ruhu. On the other hand, Ling Kai had set off by himself to visit southern Jing in order to assist Ling Zhao. As for Ling Tian himself, he had already retreated based on the arranged route, and once he had gathered Ling 17 as well as Feng Mo, they would attack Fingyang from the rear. Upon receiving this news, Ming Lige felt his anxiety burn even higher. The war situation was highly tense at this moment, their opportunity fleeting. They had to completely eliminate Zhao Fingyang's army and return to Skybearing before the Yu family in Northern Wei got hold of the news. This was in order to remain absolutely safe, and it was only if they managed to do so that they would be able to swallow this big piece of meat that was the Zhao family army in peace. Thus, Ming Lige set down the order once more, to throw out all excess baggage, and make full speed for the road. At the Sobbing Ghost Mountain Pass, the troops belonging to the Ling family increased over and over, with many similar banners flapping in the wind. All those indicated their allegiance to Ling family. Of course, it was the peerless military strategist Zhao Fingyang that felt as though his 5 organs were truly smoldering. Concerning the news about the Blue Jade River being cut off, Zhao Fingyang would naturally be the last to find out. Before this, the Zhao family only had a hypothesis and did not dare to inform Zhao Fingyang. In the event that they were wrong and disrupted the mental state of the army, then that would be a terrible consequence. By the time the pigeon letter was sent off, almost a day and night had passed. At that time, Zhao Fingyang himself was still calm and unruffled, awaiting the news of success from Ming Yuoyan. But when the pigeon letter arrived, it was more akin to a stick that hit him right in the head. Zhao Fingyang vomited blood and passed out. No one could blame Zhao Fingyang for his actions. Anyone in his shoes would probably do the same. With the Blue Jade River suddenly having its flow interrupted, flooding and devastating the riverbanks, this caused the Heavenly Water Ravine to no longer have a passable road, cutting off his retreat route. The worst part was that without supplies from the homeland, he only had less than half a month's rations for his army. This was a surefire path to defeat. The only option they had left was to rush and conquer the Sobbing Ghost Mountain in front of them, entering the Ling family's lands to plunder and rob for themselves. However, was it still possible at this time? No, it was too late. If Zhao Fingyang had really attacked the moment Yu Yanhai arrived, ignoring his losses, he might have really broken through. But it was already too late now. The iron had already gone cold. Right now, there were more than 50,000 men standing guard at Sobbing Mountain Pass, and this figure was in the process of increasing. Zhao Fingyang could be said to have lost his last and final chance, but no one could blame him. After all, with the route of Heavenly Water Ravine Pass, he could constantly receive supplies and choose when to attack or retreat without fear for any future consequences. Not only Zhao Fingyang, any general when placed with this scenario, would do the same. Who would have thought that someone actually existed in the world who could blast off part of a landscape countless years old? That was supposed to be the work of a god. But now, that miracle actually happened. The world's most majestic mountain city had turned into a city surrounded by water. The people outside could not enter, nor the people inside exit. Zhao Fingyang and his 150,000 troops were placed in an awkward position. Only death awaited. In his despair, Zhao Fengyang almost went crazy. There was no chance for him to still remain sane, faced with defeat at this juncture, as well as to be reduced to a mere prisoner. He was even more unwilling to see the 500 years of hard work and accumulation of the Zhao family all destroyed in his hands. Under this extreme despair, Zhao Fengyang took the action of burning all his bridges. Or maybe, this was the only thing left that he could do, to gather all his soldiers and do a head-on assault at Sobbing Ghost Mountain. Whatever the losses, he had to cut out a path of safety for himself. This was the only chance of survival he had left right now. As such, before the flames of war had cleared, while the scent of blood was still fresh in the pass, the silence that had reigned for 6 days was shattered once more. Furthermore, this attack was more desperate than the previous times by over 100 times. The Zhao family soldiers who knew that their supply lines were cut off went all out in desperation. This sort of madness even let Yu Yanhai, who was purportedly the #1 commander for defense, feel a great headache. The Zhao family soldiers had no fear of death, even if they had to sacrifice 100 lives just to take one step or even half a step. They had no hesitation in doing so, to the point that they could not wait to die. They were even more swift and fierce as compared to the Ling family's troops. Yu Yanhai was depressed and thought to himself, when did this group of soldiers suddenly convert their occupations to become death warriors? Yu Yanhai was actually overcomplicating matters, for the underlying reason was with the Zhao soldiers. All of them knew that their retreat route had been broken, and if the status quo didn't change, they would sooner or later starve to death. There was no difference between them dying from hunger or dying from an enemy's sword, and furthermore, even if it was a slim chance, there was still a possibility of breaking through Sobbing Mountain Pass. Under such circumstances, all that filled their heads was to kill one to break even, kill two to profit. Thus they displayed such madness. This was also the meaning behind an army burning with righteous indignation would be bound to win. It was this sort of grieving soldiers that posed the worst nightmare to the Ling family soldiers. The death count rose to an extreme level, such that even those injured blood iron warriors that Wang Han had left recuperating in the pass were forced to clench their teeth and pick up their weapons to rush into the battlefield. Both sides were fully immersed in the war, and with every second, someone would fall. Every now and then, a group of people clashing would be left with a bunch of corpses, and Zhao Fengyang, who had his heart steeled to break past the defenses, was staring with reddened eyes at the war zone. So long as he saw that the battle was not in their favor, he would wave his red flag, and a fresh batch of soldiers would then rush up. Human wave tactics. That was right. Even if he had to use the lives of all his men present, he had to forge an escape route. Zhao Fengyang knew that if he could not break through Sobbing Ghost Pass, he would die either way. Thus he made up his mind to succeed or die trying. This bloodbath continued for 2 days straight. Under the perversely many attack commands given by Zhao Fengyang, the Zhao family soldiers rushed up like waves striking against the shore continuously. Yu Yanhai had bloodshot eyes, as he was only left with 5,000 reserve troops that he had yet to send out. However, the Zhao family's attack showed no signs of ceasing. Sobbing Mountain Pass looked as though it was about to be lost. Even if Yu Yanhai was an expert in defense, even if he was the best at it, but he could not do anything without troops, just like how even the cleverest housewife could not cook a meal without rice. His opponent had already turned into a lunatic, a completely insane person who disregarded life and death that he could not resist. Yu Yanhai could only let out a long sigh, and with a eishua, his saber was drawn. His eyes turned bitingly cold at this point as he thought, since things have already gotten to this point, then let me accompany Sobbing Ghost Pass to live or die. To have led such a ragtag army to defend against the elites of the Zhao family soldiers for 8 days, furthermore with the acclaimed military expert Zhao Fengyang in command. This is good enough. The order that the Ling family courtyard gave me was to obstruct them for 6 days. It's the 8th day now, what should I be unsatisfied about? Yu Yanhai let out a mocking smile as he raised his saber. His left hand gripped the horsewhip, ready to command it to charge forward. So long as the horsewhip came down, the warhorse would fearlessly charge straight into the fray. With Yu Yanhai's frail body and weak cultivation, he would immediately become meat paste. General, look! Beside him, his aide pulled on the whip. his other hand pointing to another direction. A look of joy was on his face as he spoke. "It's our armed forces troops and horses. It's our main army. They've arrived." Where the aide pointed, countless red flags dotted the area in a sea of red, as though it were the clouds at sunset covering the entire sky and earth. Strong and steady hoofbeats sounded with earth-shattering momentum as they rushed over. The frontmost flag was raised above all others, fluttering in the wind. Painted in gold were the two words Ling and Tian. These two words on the flag seemed to have given it some sort of spirit, as though a monarch had descended from the heavens to earth in the most majestic manner possible, looking with disdain from the corner of his eye at the world below him. Chapter 581, Outcome Determined. It is young noble Ling Tian. Young noble Ling Tian is here to reinforce us. A loud roar sounded and it spread throughout the battlefield. Ling Tian. These two words seem to carry with them a mystical power. All of a sudden, the warriors of the Ling family seemed to have eaten an aphrodisiac and became extremely lively. As for the Zhao family soldiers, they seemed to have curled up in fear as their eyes darted around the battlefield. With the Zhao family's morale dropping to rock bottom and the Ling family's morale being boosted, the Ling family army that was originally in danger of defeat had actually defended against the Zhao family's attacks. Ling Tian was currently the idol of all the armies and soldiers in the continent. With a mere 5 men, he charged into a 400,000-man army to save his father and had actually retreated safely. He was even able to create mountains of corpses within the enemy's army and had made use of the battle to wipe out the elites of the Northern Wei army. His battle record had spread throughout the whole continent and his existence was like that of a battle deity. Hearing that Ling Tian was here, the Ling family soldiers were immediately at ease. They even felt that Zhao Fengyang's 150,000-man army weren't enough for them to kill a broken bar. This was Meng Liji's plan of raising his troops' morale while crushing his enemy's morale. How would the meticulous Meng Liji let go of such a good opportunity to raise his soldiers' morale? Without a second thought, he carried out such a plan. A broken bar. Before the shock of Ling Tian's arrival had faded, Meng Liji's elite reinforcements were already at the front of the formation. A series of sharp shrills could be heard filling the sky and the soldiers of the Ling family split into two. Following that, arrows covered the sky like dark clouds and turned the whole sky dark before those thousands of arrows landed in the Zhao family's camp. Countless miserable shrieks could be heard and 3,000 Ling family cavalry charged into the battlefield and the enemy's formations. It was like a bunch of adult elephants charging into a herd of sheep. The 3,000 cavalry waved their blades at the same time. The neat row of blade lights broke through the clouds and formed a white bolt of lightning. As they waved their blades down, a fountain of blood sprayed out from the Zhao army's formation. The faces of the 3,000 soldiers remained cold and they continued breaking through the enemy's formation, leaving behind a path of blood. They arrived at the back of the Zhao family formation. Just when everyone thought that this cavalry would turn around and launch a second round of massacre in the formation, the cavalry had sped up and dashed towards the middle army where Zhao Fengyang was located. The middle army where Zhao Fengyang was located was undeniably the core of the Zhao family army but also where the defense was the tightest. Attacking the middle army with 3,000 cavalry was akin to seeking death. That's right, they were indeed seeking their deaths. However, they had to die a meaningful death. The speed of the war horses was increased to the maximum and the horses were already panting heavily with white smoke coming out of their nostrils and mouth. This was a sign of immense exhaustion and all of the energy was converted into the fastest possible speed. The 3,000 cavalry of the Ling family raised up their blood-stained blades and charged towards Zhao Fengyang with a boundless killing intent. Death warriors. These cavalry who were seeking death were the elite death warriors of the Ling family. With certain death in their hearts, they created an opening in Zhao Fengyang's army. They used their deaths in exchange for the largest benefits. On the other side, 8 flags were raised in the Ling family army and another cavalry charged out of the Ling family army. It was another 3,000 men, following behind the blood path which their comrades carved out. They sprinted forward in an almost fanatical manner. Another path was created, following that a broken bar, another path, a broken bar. A total of 8 paths were created, and the 24,000 cavalry soldiers of the Ling family charged out in a crazed fashion. They ignored the malevolent-looking Zhao family soldiers as though they didn't exist and sacrificed their lives to kill a blood path. After the cavalry, the densely packed infantry charged forward like a raging tsunami. A full 24,000 elite cavalry and 85,000 infantry. These 100,000 soldiers were already the largest military might that Meng Liege could take out right now. However, he invested them all into this single battle. He sent them all into battle the moment they reached the battlefield without a single shred of hesitation. He did not leave any reserves behind and did not have any considerations. Everything would be decided with a single battle. In the Ling family camp, only 10,000 violent Wen gang members were left to guard the camp. Even if they had some battle prowess, they were not a proper army after all and could not participate in this battle directly. The 2 gang leaders of the violent Wind gang, Ling 3, and Leland, gripped their blades with their muscles all tensed up and battle intent soaring. They hated the fact that they could not dive into the intense battle to do battle as well. However, under Meng Liege's strict orders, they did not dare to make a rash move and could only clench their fists in frustration. This was also an extremely crazy plan, ending the battle with the fastest possible speed with the price of a large number of casualties before returning to Skybearing immediately. This was Meng Liege's plan for the battle. Even if Skybearing had a robust strength, it was difficult for them to support 3 different battles at the same time. The 3 different battles had already exhausted the bulk of Skybearing's army, and Skybearing was currently like a naked virgin without a single shred of defense. Currently, the Ling family did not have the time to waste with the Zhao family. Even if the Zhao family did not have the ability to drag out the battle with the Ling family, their Ling family didn't have that ability either. They had to wipe out the Zhao family in a single blow. They had to end the battle swiftly before the Yu family had a chance to react to their battle. If their battle with the Zhao family dragged on, Yu Manlu would make use of the opportunity to send out his forces and attack the Ling family from all directions. At that time, the Ling family would face the risk of being split up into pieces. Even if Ling Tian and Yu Manlu had a 5-year agreement between them, none of them, including Ling Tian, Ling Chen, or Li Zhu, felt that Yu Manlu would let go of such a good opportunity in order to maintain his gentlemanly poise. That was something that was impossible. Thus, Meng Liege adopted such a battle strategy despite the large number of casualties. In order to quickly gain victory over desperate soldiers, they could only pay a huge price. Apart from this, there wasn't another way. As long as there was another way, the military strategist Meng Liege would not have made such a risky decision. However, he had no choice but to make such a huge sacrifice in order to wipe out the threat in the east. Zhao Fingyang's eyes narrowed. They have arrived. He never imagined that the Ling family would move so quickly. It was as if the Ling family had already made all of their preparations before this. Could it be that the flood was a doing of the Ling family? However, just how did they accomplish such a feat? Knock down the mountain? How could that be possible? Was this something that a human could accomplish? If a human was capable of such a feat, their whole family wouldn't have led such a carefree life for 500 years. With things developing to such a point, Zhao Fingyang did not have the time to consider if the Ling family was prepared before this. He also did not have the time to wonder if the reversal of the Blue Jade River was a scheme of the Ling family. It was already meaningless to think about these at this point. Zhao Fingyang only knew that this could be the final battle of his life. If the first wave of the Ling family cavalry really breaks through the defense line of the middle army, Zhao Fingyang's army would fall into chaos immediately. Although he knew that his defeat was near, Zhao Fingyang would never allow such a humiliation to happen. He would rather die in a bitter battle. Zhao Fingyang's eyes burned with craziness as he waved his command flag down resolutely. The sky was immediately covered by a dark wave of arrows. Arrows shot out from the Zhao family camp continuously, and plenty of the Ling family cavalry fell off their horses. However, they were charging too quickly, and the fastest cavalry troops were already out of the arrows' range. In a couple of breaths' time, they were only an arrow's distance away from the Zhao family camp. At such a distance, Unless the Zhao family gets into a brawl with the Ling army, it was impossible to harm them. The horn sounded and the remaining 100,000 Zhao family soldiers let out a battle cry. With a heaven-shaking roar, half of their soldiers charged forward to receive the Ling family's cavalry. As the ground trembled, the cavalry of both parties grew nearer and nearer to each other. They could clearly see the faces of each other and could even clearly see the bloodshot eyes of the other party. The Zhao family archers only had the chance to let out 2 waves of arrows before the cavalry of both armies met in an earth-shattering battle. After everyone was blinded by the flashing reflections of the blade, the sounds of bestial cries could be heard in both armies and blood shot to the skies. A loud roar sounded. At the rear of the Zhao family, a squad of cavalry soldiers charged down from a small hill and penetrated into the back of the Zhao family army. A loud roar sounded. Ling Tian is here. His voice sounded like thunder. The person in the lead was clad in black with a golden crown. His face was like a refined piece of jade and had an extraordinary appearance. He was young noble Ling, the #1 death god of the continent. Ling Tian was in the middle, Feng Mo on his left and Ling 17 on his right. There were another 1,500 burly men behind them charging down like tigers. Anyone who blocked them would be dragged into a storm of blood and a wave of miserable shrieks sounded. Countless broken limbs flew out in every direction and blood spewed out like water sprinklers watering a garden. A blade in Ling Tian's hand shot out like a shooting star towards the marshal's flag of the Zhao family army. Even after slicing the flagpole into 2, the force of the blade was not completely exhausted and it continued to weave through the Zhao army, slicing 3 burly men into 6 halves. The Zhao camp had fallen into complete chaos after Ling Tian's appearance. Ling Tian's sudden appearance was like a huge stimulus to the already intense battle, and the miserable battle exploded further. At the same time, the Zhao family's final bit of morale was also wiped out. Among the Ling family cavalry, a skinny officer jumped off his horse and his figure weaved through the enemy's forces like a demon. With a flash of sword light, more than a dozen family soldiers miserably collapsed onto the ground. Before the others could come close, this skinny figure spun around and 7 to 8 small black goose-egg-sized balls shot towards the surrounding. After spinning around again, another 10 or more goose-egg-sized balls flew out and a large portion of these black balls shot towards the archers. Hong hong hong, a broken bar. Without a single sign, a series of explosions sounded. Wherever the balls exploded, a small clearing would be made and decapitated heads would fly. These decapitated heads would then be sent flying by another series of explosions like they were wingless birds. What? Thunderbeds? Ling Tian's body trembled. Even that lass is here? That skinny figure then shot to the sky with a crisp roar and levitated in midair. At the same time, that figure spun around and countless black balls were sent flying in all directions. Following that, a series of shrieks sounded throughout the Zhao army and limbs were sent flying in all directions. Lin Phoenix eyes with a dense killing intent. She was Miss Li Zhu, who was carrying her secret weapon. From her attacks alone, almost 1,000 were injured and killed. The more important thing was that this special weapon had destroyed the spirit of the Zhao family. You still decided to make this thing? Who asked you to use such an item? Ling Tian's angry roar sounded from afar as though he was extremely dissatisfied. However, his next sentence revealed his intentions. Using it in such a manner is far too big of a waste. Don't throw it all away. Leave some for me to play with. Li Zhu snorted with anger. No more. There isn't a single one left. It is best for you to continue being a Confucian scholar. Pretentious fellow. Ling Tian's sword swept out and he jumped off his horse. A few soldiers were sent flying and Ling Tian sped to Li Zhu's side while shouting, "Nonsense, who are you called a pretentious fellow?" Li Zhu snorted twice and spun around again, shooting out 6 thunderbeds. The 7 or 8 enemies around her perished under her sword and she even managed to find the time to mock Ling Tian. "Young Master Ling, apart from you, is there anyone worthy of this title?" "Only the officials are allowed to use fire, but the commoners are not allowed to light up their lamps." Ling Tian chuckled and did not stay on this topic with Li Zhu. "You don't need to care if I am a true gentleman or pretentious fellow. Don't change the topic. Are you going to give them to me or not?" Li Zhu floated up and flew out 70 odd feet, killing all of the soldiers along the way. I am just not going to give them to you. Are you going to bite me? Ling Tian flew into a rage and a white splinter shot out from the heaven splitter. The surrounding 100 feet were immediately cleansed and Ling Tian said with his teeth clenched, "All right, if you dare to not give it to me, you better not regret it in future. When I return, I will carry out the family law to smack your bottom until it becomes raw. Smack my bottom if you dare." Who is afraid of who? From afar, Li Zu's laughter sounded and a series of explosions could be heard. These two individuals had actually begun casually chatting in the midst of the battlefield. A broken bar Thingmo and the others didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, despite having a good conversation, the two of them did not stay idle and the number of people who died in their hands was more than in the hands of anyone else. Ling Tian's figure flashed about like a ghost and a long blood path was carved out. The next moment, Ling Tian appeared in front of Li Zu with his arm stretched out. "Give it to me." Li Zu snorted and threw out a bag which was on her waist. "Think, a broken bar, I can have my fun now." A broken bar. Ling Tian's anger was immediately transformed into joy as he dug his hand into the bag. "I shall give you something good as a reward when we return." A broken bar. A broken bar. His face suddenly contorted in anger. "It's all gone?" Li Zu chuckled and made a funny face. Waving her right hand, she merely threw out the last two thunderbeds. "I already passed everything I have to you." Ling Tian was thoroughly incensed. However, he was completely helpless against this demoness. Following Ling Tian's arrival and a pincer attack from two directions, the situation of the battle had finally tilted in the favor of the Ling family. With Ling Tian joining hands with Li Zu in the explosions which Li Zu caused, the enemy's camp was completely messed up. As the battle dragged on, the morale of the soldiers was destroyed, but the morale of the Ling soldiers burned even brighter. In a state of extreme fear, the soldiers at the outermost rim finally could not hold off the Ling soldiers and their defensive line collapsed. After the first outbreak of fear, this fear would spread across the whole army. More and more soldiers began to escape and the situation began spiraling out of control. The loss of those soldiers was like the collapse of a mountain. Zhao Fingyang let out a long sigh as he watched Ling Tian charge at him with killing intent. He then looked around at the escaping Zhao family soldiers and was completely disheartened. Straightening his blade, he placed it beside his neck and let out a loud laugh. "I never imagined that I, Zhao Fingyang, who had never experienced defeat, would also face such a day." His hand moved and he was about to commit suicide. Dang! A small copper coin flew from afar and smashed into Zhao Fingyang's sword. Zhao Fingyang's sword was sent flying and it broke apart in midair. Even though Zhao Fingyang's sword was sent flying in time, a deep cut was still made on his neck and fresh blood began spewing out. His body then shook unsteadily and he fell down from the horse. Only at that moment could the sound of the coin slicing through the air be heard. A skinny black figure shot forward with a speed even faster than an arrow. Before Zhao Fingyang landed on the ground, this black figure caught him. Ling Tian held onto Zhao Fingyang's body with one hand and used his other hand to press onto his acupoints. Following that, a white cloth was wrapped around Zhao Fingyang's neck tightly and Ling Tian let out a roar. "The Grand Marshal Zhao Fingyang has been captured. Those who surrender will not be killed. Those who surrender will not be killed." His voice rolled out in all directions like the waves. From afar, Meng Liji's beard fluttered lightly in the wind and a smile could be seen in his face. The outcome of the battle had been determined. Chapter 582, Subtle Accounts After Autumn. In the end, out of the 120,000 soldiers that remained in Zhao Fingyang's middle army after the first battle, the casualty count numbered over 50,000. The people who escaped were less than 7,000, with the remainder being taken as prisoners of war. However, even as the victor, the number of deaths and injuries sustained by the Ling family were almost equivalent to the Zhao family. Naturally, to accomplish the entire task in one fell swoop, the price one needed to pay could be imagined. The deceased included 5,000 blood iron warriors and Wang Han who Ling Tian had left behind. Out of the 24,000 cavalry, more than 5,000 died, and the injured were not even in the statistics. The huge price paid this time made everyone unable to put on expressions of joy, even though they won the battle. A Pyrrhic victory, not just in name but in reality. This was also the first time since Ling Tian had been reborn in this world that he had lost so terribly. Wang Han and company originally should not have died, for they were all bedridden due to their previous wounds. However, upon realizing that the situation was not in the Ling family's favor, they had borne with their injuries and rushed out to hold the fort on one side, gaining precious time for Meng Liege's troops to rush over. The price was that all 5,000 of them gave their lives in return. Out of the 5 generals within the 5,000 strong blood iron warriors, only Wang Han's corpse could still be barely recognized. The rest had been muddled in with the meat paste that was thousands of humans lumped together, no longer able to be told apart. Upon receiving the news, Ling Tian sighed to himself, keeping silent for a long time. This could actually be considered the first battle towards stepping on the stage of world domination. However, it was just this one battle, and he had already lost 5 men under his personal command. 5 good people. One of them was even one of the 3 leaders of the Blood Iron Warriors. How much blood of his brothers would he have to spill further down the road? Ling Tian was never stingy about money, power, or wealth, but he hoarded his personal subordinates, his brothers in arms, like how a rich man hoards gold. Even after successfully destroying the ancient unbreakable Ravine Pass, and even achieving victory twice in a row, he was supposed to be ecstatic and jubilant. But he remained silent and moody. Wang Han, brother Wang, a broken bar, it's all my fault. I should have been the one to request to stay in sobbing Ghost Pass or Broken Bar. Feng Mo and the rest pounced on the corpses of their fellow brothers, bursting into tears. Feng Mo and Wang Han had been together ever since Ling Zhao assumed command, and they had taken care of each other for almost 2 decades. 20 years of brotherhood, how was it a small thing to be best buddies for the past 20 years, then suddenly see his closest friend ice cold just like that, not moving even when shaken? What sort of feeling would one experience? If it was possible, Feng Mo would rather have traded his life for Wang Han's, than to accept the fact that his good brother would never wake up ever again. And for Ling Tian, even with 2 lifetimes, he never had this sort of experience before. But he, above everyone else, understood the sincerity behind this feeling, and how valuable it was. He could also empathize with Feng Mo's current agony, his deepest regret, and anger. The cold autumn wind blew, and heaven and earth shared the pain of the people. Everyone on the battlefield quietly stood up one after another, saying their final farewells to their brothers lying there. Even those grievously injured, or with broken limbs, would run the risk of their injuries worsening to stand up straight, looking at their brothers one last time. Countless corpses lay neatly in rows, with the blood on some not even dry yet. Ling Tian bowed deeply before taking a few steps forward and gazing at the huge army standing at attention. His eyes brimmed with tears and his voice trembled as he addressed the crowd. Brothers in arms, I am Ling Tian. Today we have won, obtained a complete victory. But so many of our dearest brothers have also left us because of this victory. In my heart, I feel the agony as much as all of you here. This is because those brothers lying on the ground are also the brothers of me, Ling Tian. I'm not going to spout any hypocritical bullshit, like I would rather not have this victory just to see all of them happy and well. This would just make me a hypocritical bastard who steps on and profanes the sacrifice of our brothers. Under the urging of his internal energy, his voice traveled far and wide, clearly heard. From the crowd came sounds of stifled choking. It's just that, when I see all our brothers who have passed on, I suddenly feel a sort of pride. That's right. Pride. Sincere pride. Ling Tian's voice took on an inspiring tone. Our dead brothers, every one of them died from injuries to the chest, from the front. What does that mean? His eyes, like lightning, stared at everyone in front of him. This means that none of them were cowards, and all of them charged bravely and met with death fearlessly. They all died amid the fighting. They are all true warriors. And this also means that each and every brother, while fighting, was looking after the backs of their own partners. Ling Tian screamed out. He suddenly spun, pointing at the ground as he hollered, "Do you see that? These are our brothers." To protect their brothers, they would not hesitate to sacrifice their lives. With such good brothers, what do we have to be afraid of? We can safely entrust our backs to them. All those soldiers who sacrificed themselves died so that the rest of their brothers could continue living. I'm proud of that, because they have succeeded. I'm also proud of all of you because all your brothers are role models. They are all people that will always have your back, life and death. Brothers. The choking sounds had gradually turned to sniffing as tears dripped down ceaselessly. Now I announce, let us bring our brothers, our unyielding heroic spirit, back to sky-bearing. Ling Tian had a burning gaze. Our lives have been exchanged through the sacrifice of our brothers. We have to put in our utmost effort to take care of all the families of our brothers who have died in battle so that our partners in the underworld will be able to rest in peace. Also, we have to bring their final wishes, their heroic spirit, to war against the world, clinching victory after victory, to reassure them their sacrifice was not for nothing. Their heroic spirit will live on. Brothers, rest in peace. Their heroic spirit will live on. Brothers, rest in peace. Tens of thousands of soldiers hollered at the top of their voices in one go. All of them had on emotional expressions, with tears flowing down their faces. Amid the raucous hollering, Ming Lige took a cursory glance at the number of casualties before bidding farewell to Ling Tian and returning first to sky-bearing. While they won this war, they had after all sacrificed so many men. Sky-bearing would be in a depressed mood because of this, and Ling Tian would thus definitely not choose such a time to return. He simply said, "Old Ming, where there war, there will be sacrifice." Having one person or 10,000 dead, it's still a death. This has just begun, and there will be bigger stages for us in the future. After you return to sky-bearing, you have to begin to prepare in consideration for the bigger picture. We can afford to be sad when people die, but we cannot be dragged down by it. Remember this point. Ming Lige nodded before mounting his horse. Before he left, Ling Tian added, "This time, for the soldiers who died on the battlefield, the family will be compensated 3 times the usual amount. See to it for me. We'll use the finances from the Ling family courtyard. Tell Supervisor Zhao that I gave the command." Upon hearing the title a Supervisor Zhao, Ming Lige's body shuddered for a bit, as he stared at Ling Tian with a complex expression. He sighed in the end, and with a bitter smile, rode off. Along with him was half of the surrendered Zhao soldiers as well as the second master of the Zhao family, Zhao Fengying. Ling Tian naturally understood why Ming Lige gave such a look. This war, while sudden, was after all one fought with the Zhao family, and they had even captured the second master as a prisoner. Furthermore, they had even destroyed the Zhao family's land for a good 1,500 kilometers along with the Zhao family's protective screen, which was the heavenly water ravine pass. While sky-bearing was suffused in a depressing atmosphere, it would soon pass. However, for the Zhao family, it was just starting. But now, the person in charge of the Ling family's finances was the only princess of the Zhao family, the granddaughter of the Zhao family's head. Let's not talk about Ling Tian having to worry about such a complicated matter. Even Ming Lige got a headache just thinking about being in Ling Tian's shoes. He could only wish his monarch good luck. After sending off Ming Lige, Ling Tian looked at Yu Yanhai, before warmly smiling as he greeted, "Uncle Yu, it's been hard on you this time." Yu Yanhan let out a small smile, yet replied in a very stern tone, "How could young noble address me so casually? I was only carrying out orders. Compared to those brothers in arms who died in the war for us, my hard work pales in comparison to them." Ling Tian could not help but laugh. This General Yu was well known for loving his soldiers as though they were his children, and furthermore, he was an old-fashioned man through and through, just like Lao Fu Ziwan, cutting an extremely distinct line between superior and subordinates. He was initially a minister in the imperial court, the same rank as Ling Zhao, and hence could accept it when Ling Tian called him uncle in the past. However, After sky-bearing changed hands, Yu Yanhan was now under them, thus his eccentric behavior flared up and would not allow Ling Tian to address him as uncle anymore. Ling Tian was helpless against his attitude, and in fact was extremely impressed with him. Ha ha, since that's the case, then hear my order, General Yu. Ling Tian straightened his face. Old man is present. Yu Yanhan cupped his fists together, his face stern. I command you to reorganize the troops present and repair the sobbing ghost pass. In addition, gather all the soldiers and horses from the nearby 3 cities, and command them to proceed towards the east. The moment the flood from the Blue Jade River decreases, you have to seize control of the Heavenly Water Ravine Pass before the Zhao family does so. There can be no mistakes. This subordinate receives the order. I dare to use my head as a guarantee that I'll accomplish the task even if I die. I will not let the deaths of my men be in vain. Yu Yanhai swore violently. Ling Tian could only helplessly smile. He thought to himself, would I dare to ask for your head even if you did fail? Gazing at the receding figure of Yu Yanhai in the distance, Ling Tian suddenly realized there was another person standing there, the great demoness Li Zhu. Our young noble Ling's face immediately turned dark as he tried to rein in his anger. He originally hoped that Li Zhu would go back and console Jian Zhu, but instead, she stayed here on her own initiative. Why are you not leaving? Quickly get lost. There are still a lot of matters waiting for you back there. Ling Tian glared as he rudely said. HMPH. Li Zhu only snorted. You don't dare to go back and face her yourself, so you want me to go and extinguish the fire for you first? How is there such a good thing in the world? I'm not your scapegoat. Do you take me for a fool? From past to present, the person who was said to understand Ling Tian the most was not told Madame Ling, Chu Tinger, or even his lover Ling Chen or his best brother Ling Jian. Being a person of 2 lifetimes, he could lie to the world, but wasn't Li Zhu also a person of 2 lifetimes? Ling Tian nearly burst in anger. It turned out that this lass had long ago seen through his own calculations, and knew what he wanted her to do, so she pretended to be silly and stayed back instead. Come here. Ling Tian broadened his footsteps, walking towards his tent. Not going. You think I'm a fool? Li Zhu seemed to have grown roots on her legs, fixing herself in place. With her intelligence, she knew that she would not have a good time now that Ling Tian was angry. So why would she listen to him? Are you trying to rebel? Since you're not a fool, then this young noble here will make you into one. Ling Tian suddenly reversed direction, appearing in front of Li Zhu in an instant and sealing her acupoints before hoisting her up. He personally knew how hard it was to deal with Li Zhu and was afraid that he would have to expend a lot of effort. So he suddenly attacked when her guard was down, aiming straight to seal her cultivation. Let me down. This is molestation. Catch the pervert. Being carried over his shoulder, Li Zhu was angry and embarrassed and unconsciously started using the old catchphrases from her past life as her tiny fist pounded repeatedly on his back. However, because her acupoints were sealed, it was just like massaging his back. Ling Tian snorted and shrugged, causing her body to slip downward instead. It was okay for him to be hit on the back, but this situation would be too inelegant. Thus, Ling Tian carried her like a burlap sack over his shoulder. Li Zhu's face happened to be situated near his buttocks, and every time Ling Tian walked, her face would briefly come into contact. This caused her face to turn as red as a monkey's bottom, and she started to furiously scold. Ling Tian, you a broken bar, you rogue, quickly put me down. You a broken bar, wait, see if this lady here will forgive you. At this time, Ling Tian had already reached the tent door, but he suddenly stopped and ridiculed her. I advise you not to struggle so much. These past 2 days, I've eaten too much barbecued meat, causing my stomach to feel pretty uncomfortable with diarrhea every day. If I suddenly lose control of myself and let everything go, I'm afraid a broken bar. Stop talking, you disgusting pighead. Before he could finish, Li Zhu had already taken a 180-degree change. She had no choice, with such an embarrassing position where her head was plastered right at his buttocks. Or broken bar. If he really let go a broken bar, then wouldn't I a broken bar? Grinding noises came from Li Zhu's mouth, as she really did not dare to speak another word. Having succeeded in his ploy, Ling Tian secretly chuckled to himself. For someone of their level, their organs were actually many times stronger than a normal person, so how would he ever have the runs? However, it was not that Li Zhu did not know of this, it was just that she did not dare to bet on it. After all, an internal energy expert was also able to control every part of his body, so if he controlled himself to fart out a broken bar. At this point, both of them entered the tent, but he did not put Li Zhu down, instead pulling her calf a little so that she shifted to a more comfortable position. After that he nonchalantly asked, "On the battlefield, I asked you to shock the world, so why didn't you? And you obviously knew why I wanted you to rush back, so why stay? Give me a reasonable explanation." Now that the war had ended, there was finally some excess time. Thus Ling Tian began to settle his scores at this opportune moment. He was still brooding over the fact that Li Zhu refused to allow him to shock the world, doing as he pleased. Such a fun event was actually few and far between. "Put me down and I'll tell you the reason." Lying on his shoulder, Li Zhu deeply inhaled his manly scent, and she couldn't help but feel hot, her heartbeat also increasing. "Pa!" Li Zhu suddenly yelped in shock. It turned out that Ling Tian had unceremoniously smacked her crisply on her buttocks, snickering as he replied, "Say it." "Spill the beans now, or else I'll beat you some more." Li Zhu exerted fiercely, trying to push herself off Ling Tian, but with her internal energy sealed, what struggling could she do? Ling Tian, however, was infuriated by her struggling and could not help but start smacking her more to remind her who was in charge. As he slapped, he began to settle into a rhythm. Right now, summer had just ended and autumn was settling in, so Li Zhu was not wearing thick clothes at the moment. When Ling Tian's palm came down, it was as though he was slapping on her bare skin, with so much smoothness and buoyancy in his palm. Whenever he slapped, he could even feel her skin ripple with the impact, causing him to involuntarily get excited. He threw the thought about punishment to the back of his head as his hands both took turns to start smacking her, left hand, then right, then left eye gain a broken bar as he smacked. Ling Tian began to get into a rhythm just like beating the drums, which caused him to feel even more excited. Ling Tian would naturally withhold most of his strength, and neither could he bear to use much strength, but his smacking produced an extremely crisp sound that was pleasing to the ear. Li Zhu initially yelped non-stop, struggling continuously, but it was unknown why she suddenly lost strength midway, as her face grew redder and her body hotter. Following every hit from Ling Tian, her body would tremble involuntarily in response, and soft moans would escape uncontrollably from her mouth every now and then. A musky fragrance started to fill up the whole tent at this moment. It was the scent of a woman in heat. Ling Tian finally discovered something fishy and lifted her over his shoulder to take a look. What he saw was a lass that looked as though she had become boneless, lying on him without resistance, her body flushed red and hot to the touch. The famous demoness did not seem to match up to her current appearance. This gave Ling Tian a huge shock, as he suddenly recalled something. His body convulsed as though an electric shock had run through him, and he quickly threw the delicate body in his arms onto the military bed as though he was holding onto a hot potato. Oh, the so-called bed was actually just a simple mattress placed on the ground, and of course was incomparable to their big beds at home. With Li Zhu bereft of strength, landing on the bed hurt her, and her eyes immediately snapped open. Upon seeing Ling Tian, her face flushed like a ripe peach, but she did not leap at Ling Tian for revenge. Instead, she grabbed the bedding near her, and not caring if it was clean or dirty, buried her head inside it. After a long while, choking sounds came softly from under the blanket, increasing in volume. An ambiguous atmosphere filled the entire room all of a sudden. Ling Tian looked awkward and could only twist his hands in embarrassment as he stood by the side. He was already scolding himself repeatedly in his heart. Was this how an elder brother should treat his sister? What sort of attitude was that? Why was I so muddled in the head, and why did my hands have to be so dirty? He had no idea how to right the situation. In the end, he cleared his throat and coughed twice, but not knowing what to say, he coughed again. The tent seemed to suddenly turn into a ward for tuberculosis patients. with repeated coughs coming out from it. After what seemed like half a day of silence, Ling Tian was praying for Li Zhu to come out and say something, so he could follow up the train of thought. However, out of his expectations, not only did Li Zhu not poke her head out, the choking sounds seemed to have intensified. Finally, Ling Tian noticed that her crying sounds had subsided somewhat, and on tenterhooks, opened his mouth to ask, "Are you a broken bar in pain?" The moment the words came out, Ling Tian almost felt like slapping himself. What sort of words were those? Wasn't this merely reminding her of what he just did? How stupid could he get? HMPH. Suddenly, an earth-shaking change occurred. Li Zhu pulled the covers away, angrily sitting up, "Still not going to unseal my acupoints? What are you waiting for? Are you going to do that once more?" "A broken bar." Ling Tian blinked repeatedly in disbelief. She was just crying 1 second ago, but suddenly became so barbarous. My goodness, it seemed like my brain is messed up, and my eyesight having problems. A broken bar must have heard and seen things. A broken bar. Seeing his startled expression, Li Zhu's face turned red once more and she suddenly pounced onto him, grabbing his arm and biting down hard. "A broken bar. A broken bar." Ling Tian let out a howl of misery, like a lone wolf at night. Biting his arm, Li Zhu spoke in an unclear voice, "Are you awake? Want another round?" "I'm awake, very awake." A broken bar. Ling Tian did not dare to use his internal energy to withstand for fear of damaging her teeth. This bite was firmly clamped down, causing him to shiver in pain as he pleaded, "My dear grand aunt, a broken bar, please let go of your royal mouth, before we talk." Li Zhu finally let go of his arm with a satisfied expression and stood up. Ling Tian did not dare to tarry, immediately unsealing her acupoints. Li Zhu snorted as she loosened her limbs. Looking at Ling Tian, she blushed once again, before pretending nothing happened as she snarled, "Still want to question me? Settle accounts? Speak. Why are you not speaking now? Are you mute? Oh great young noble Ling?" "No, I wouldn't dare." A broken bar. Ling Tian sighed in his heart, rubbing his bite wound gently as he silently cursed, "Women in the villages are all tigers. One should avoid them if they ever see only a broken bar." Chapter 583, Freak Accident. "You don't dare to? Do you think that this matter is over just because you say that you don't dare to? I haven't settled this score with you yet." Li Zhu's face turned cold and she looked at Ling Tian with an unfriendly expression. "You actually dare to treat me with such disrespect and think that matters would be over with just a single I don't dare to? Don't you want to say something else? If I let you give me an explanation, will young noble Ling be able to give me a good explanation? How am I being disrespectful?" Ling Tian knew that it was impossible for him to wiggle out of this situation and could only twist logic. It is only proper for an older brother to teach his disobedient younger sister a lesson. "Rotten lass, do you still want to get beaten?" As Ling Tian said that, he swung his fist ferociously. "Who is your little sister? You shameless fellow." Li Zhu wasn't afraid of Ling Tian the slightest and sneered, "How is this Miss your little sister? We have all been born into a new world already. My surname is Li while yours is Ling. Don't try to randomly claim kinship. Is this young miss correct?" You a broken bar. What do you mean by this?" Ling Tian said with exasperation. He could tell that this lass was not going to let go of him today. HMPH. "In Western Han, you did not seek this Mrs. Agreement and took a peek at my pure body. Even if we were biological siblings, how can an older brother look at his younger sister's pure body?" Li Zhu's face turned red but she continued, "When we were in Northern Wei, you also did not avoid the taboos between men and women. Today, you went even further and actually started smacking me? Speak, just what do you want?" Li Zhu's eyes turned red and she started sobbing. "I am also a pure and chaste young lady. If you repeatedly act in such a manner, how am I going to continue living? Why is my life so miserable?" As she finished, Tears were already streaming down her cheeks. She was indeed someone of the 21st century. If it was anyone else in this world, it would be impossible for her to speak these words so fluently. Even if these words would leave her mouth, she would definitely be embarrassed to death. However, Li Zhu was actually able to spout these words without pausing for a single moment and did not even forget to put up a brilliant show. She had even lamented about how bitter her life was and was obviously forcing Ling Tian to give in. As a broken bar haze, Ling Tian stomped his feet and he glared at Li Zhu. Big sister, broken bar, aren't your tears too readily available? They can be summoned whenever you want. How is your life miserable? How did I take a peek at your pure body? When we were traveling together, I also allowed you to take a look at my body as you wished. Go and continue lying to yourself. Who would believe you? I don't care. You have to take responsibility for this matter. You must. You must. You must. Li Zhu growled ferociously. My goodness. Ling Tian scratched his head and said with a headache, Big sister, have you forgotten already? The two of us area broken bar. Or what? Li Zhu wiped her tears dry and grunted, even in our previous life, we only had the same surname and belonged to the same sect. As for blood ties, we would probably have to go 8 generations back before we could find some blood ties. Even within our family, there are more than 1 or 2 couples with similar blood ties to ours. Just like Ling Zhenting and Ling Mingyan, aren't they 3 generations closer as compared to us? Ling Mingyan had to call Ling Zhenting uncle, but they were still married in the end. You are also aware that as long as 2 individuals are separated by 3 generations, they cannot be considered to have any ties between them. We were all just forced to live in a rotten big yard together, even if we don't talk about our previous life. In this current life of ours, you are young noble Ling Tian of the Ling family while I am the villager Li Zhu. With just this point alone, there aren't any blood ties between us. What is considered impossible between us and what are you still wary about? Speak. Ling Tian felt like pulling his hair out and he paced about in a crazed manner. That's different. How can they be the same as us? We broken bar. Li Zhu's face turned pale and tears welled up in her eyes. I knew that you were still filled with hatred towards me. You still hate me and have not truly forgiven me. Even after I chased after you to this world, you have not forgiven me yet. Am I right? Thus, you can marry all the women in the world except for me. Am I right? You are taking revenge on me. You just want me to spend my life in loneliness. Am I right? Li Zhu inched nearer and nearer to Ling Tian and tears continued flowing down her cheeks with a crazed stubbornness in her eyes. Ling Tian, you pretentious gentleman. On one hand, you claim that I am your younger sister, but on another hand, you are performing the acts of a male-female relationship with me. After all these, you use the best excuse of us being siblings. Ha ha ha, a broken bar. So this is how you are going to take your revenge on me. Am I right? Say something. Why aren't you saying anything? No, it isn't like that. Ling Tian was forced into retreat and he finally let out a roar. His eyes were filled with craziness as though he was an injured beast. Ever since I met you, I have not hated you any longer. You know that clearly in your heart, but you still chose to use this matter to force me? Why? You are asking me why? Why don't you tell me why? I am still a woman and I need a broad chest to lean on. What should I do? Li Zhu patted herself on the chest and a fuzzy look could be seen in her eyes. Ling Tian, you are a man who transmigrated into this world. It wouldn't matter who you choose to marry. In the 3 continents, all the countless beauties are waiting to be chosen and waiting to be attracted to you, because of your peerless talents and unparalleled martial arts. To the women of this generation, you are like the most potent poison. You can play with the universe in your palm with your knowledge and can be said to be omnipotent. No one would be able to imagine that the knowledge that you have displayed is only comparable to a college student. However, you have actually created a storm in this world. Thus, you have succeeded. But what about me? I am different from you. Even if I know more than you and I'm more knowledgeable than you, what is the use of all my knowledge? I am still a woman after all. In terms of scholarly or martial arts, in this foreign world, apart from you Ling Tian, Who else in our generation will be able to surpass me? What other man in the world would be capable of attracting me? Who else would be worthy of me marrying him? Do you think that there would be such an individual in this world? Ling Tian shook his head bitterly without replying. With Li Zu's conditions, there wouldn't be anyone in the world capable of attracting her. In terms of knowledge, there wasn't a single person. In terms of martial arts, only a few old fellows in the world would be comparable to her. As for winning against her with confidence, only Justice would be capable of doing so. While Justice's age was unknown, he definitely wouldn't be too young. Furthermore, even if Justice's age was similar to Li Zu, she definitely wouldn't like him. Because there was Ling Tian as a reference after all. How would she be able to find someone more outstanding than Ling Tian? Ling Tian never imagined that a few casual smacks would create such huge trouble for him. In fact, these few smacks of Ling Tian were only a stimulus to light the gunpowder between the two of them. Did you know why I framed you back then? You never asked me this question before, Li Zu said depressedly. Why you would frame me? Ling Tian was taken aback for a moment before laughing bitterly. This matter happened so long ago and we are no longer in the same world any longer. What is the point of mentioning this matter? It is meaningless. Li Zu ignored Ling Tian and continued. I must say it because I hated you. I really hated you. We grew up together since we were young and my body was always extremely weak when I was little. Do you remember? Every time we went out to play, you would always take good care of me. Do you remember? No one else would worry about me but you. Do you remember all of this? Ever since I was young, I loved to be around you. Do you remember that when I grew older, I became more beautiful and the others also began playing with me? Every time I was with you, I would wear the most beautiful dress that I had and would comb my hair for a long time because I wanted you to see the most beautiful me. However, you were like some crazy maniac. The more dressed up I was, the more you ignored me. Every time I went out, I would be the prettiest one with everyone else gathering around me. However, you became further and further away from me. Why? Ling Tian felt his heart shake. Thinking back about the past, he muttered under his breath, at that time, I always thought that you were too vain a broken bar. Li Zu's eyes widened and she looked at Ling Tian with disbelief. After a long while, she let out a bitter laugh. I see. So I was wrong. I was wrong. A broken bar. Your parents died when you were young and you had no one to care for you. The family didn't give you much money and you do not have any beautiful clothes to wear. Your lifestyle had always been frugal and you naturally couldn't stand my extravagance. No wonder. Why was I so foolish back then? The more you ignored me, the more I became anxious. I didn't know what I did wrong and could only think of all the possible methods to appear in front of you and attract your attention. I would even act unreasonably just so you would accompany me for a longer period of time. However, you ended up ignoring me even more and so I scolded you and wanted to beat you up. However, you did not retort a single word or fight back against me. Do you know that I cried for a full 3 days after I returned? 3 days later, I wanted to find you to apologize. However, I couldn't find you and found out after asking that the family had sent you on a mission. From then on, the time that you spent in the family became less and less. Do you remember? You were 14 then, right? However, do you remember who would meet you first when you returned? I would always be the first. Do you remember? Tears streamed down Li Zu's eyes. I would always rush out with joy to meet you and to receive you, but your eyes would always be filled with coldness or even disdain. At the very end, it was even filled with hatred, extreme hatred. Every time you looked at me, you would escape as though you had seen a ghost. I didn't even have a chance to speak with you. I don't understand and do not know what I did wrong. Was it wrong for me to like you? Where did I go wrong? Li Zu asked again before diving into the pillow and bawling her eyes out. These days carried on for more than 3 years, a full 1198 days. At that time, the family decided about my marriage. I was truly anxious to the point I wanted to die. At that time, I went to find you and wanted you to take me away or give me an idea. However, do you remember what you did? I escaped secretly and found you at Luoyang. However, you did not even give me a chance to say anything, turning around to leave immediately. At that time, I could not keep up with your speed and we fought for the first time. At that time, you were far stronger than me and you injured me. After injuring me, you left immediately without saying a thing. I waited a full day and night in the snow. A full day and night. Did you know, Ling Tian? It was during that day where my heart turned completely cold. Li Zhu wiped off her tears and continued as though she was narrating someone else's story. However, I didn't want to give up and I wasn't willing to marry someone else. When you returned, I secretly put an aphrodisiac into your drink. Ling Tian, I loved you. Even if I couldn't marry you, I wanted to give my purity to you. However, you actually scolded me for being shameless. Your words were extremely vicious or broken bar. Do you know what you said back then? You scolded me for being a shameless bitch. You said that I wasn't much better than a prostitute. Ling Tian broke out in cold sweat and his face contorted. He could naturally remember what he said back then. Now that he recalled what he said, he had the urge to bang his head against the wall. Why was he so foolish back then? However, things were just so coincidental. How would he know the truth behind the matter? After that day, I fell extremely ill. I also truly understood what hopelessness meant. For a long time after that, I was filled with hatred towards you. I hated you to the bones. I hated you to the point I wanted your death. Do you know how scary a woman's hatred is? That day, Ling Zhao and the rest sought me out for a discussion about framing you. Without a second thought, I immediately agreed with them. At that time, I hated you far too much and I wanted misfortune to fall on you. I wanted you to be taught a lesson. Ling Tian, that was truly how I felt back then. Was I very childish? Li Zhu smiled. After framing you, I began fantasizing happily about how well I would treat you after seeing you and how I can let you know about my love for you. I childishly thought that they would only eat you up and lock you up for a while. I even thought that you wouldn't need to go out and risk your life after this and could accompany me at home. I even fantasized about how I should explain matters to you and what excuses I should come up with. However, I never imagined that when I saw you again, they had already transformed you into such a state. They had actually snapped off your tendons and crippled your inner core, transforming you into a complete trash. When I saw the vicious look in your eyes, I immediately fainted. Ling Tian fell into a daze as he recalled his past life. I thought a broken bar. I thought that you were feigning pity and wanted to harm me. Broken bar, thinking about the cold-blooded gazes and heartless actions of his family members and the young lady by the door who suddenly fainted. A broken bar. Ling Tian let out a mournful groan. Only at that time did I know how much misery I had caused you. After that, I fell sick for a long time and had countless nightmares. I lost all my appetite and became extremely listless. When I tried finding you again, you had already disappeared. Thus, I sneakily went out to find you and saw a broken bar. Saw that you were picking up leaves on the ground. Seeing how you had to sleep on the streets, I no longer had the face to meet you. I could only secretly let you pick up some money and secretly send you some food. However, I did not dare to let you know that it was my doing. However, you thought that it was Ling Menger who was helping you. I may be the only one who knows that Menger helped you. I believe that I am the only one who would pay attention to a trash like you. At that time, I also thought that this was for the better. If you knew that I was the one who helped you, with your temper you would probably rather starve to death than accept my aid. Ling Menger had only aided you once back then. How would she ever notice your existence? However, this also gave me the chance to pose as Ling Menger to take care of you. Until once, I saw that Ling Zhao and the rest beating you up. Only then did I remember that they were the ones who wanted me to harm you. They were the true culprits. I wanted to take revenge against them. They were the ones who harmed you and harmed me. I want to make them lead a miserable life. At that time, I wasn't their match. After you fell unconscious back then, I treated your injuries and began my revenge. I almost went crazy at that time and my means were also vicious. In a single month, I disfigured all the women that they loved. I wanted them to have a taste of how it felt like for their loved ones to be harmed. After accomplishing all of this, when I went to find you again, I could no longer find you. I could no longer find you again. A broken bar. Woo woo woo. A broken bar. Everyone said that you died a broken bar. As such, My heart died again and I became like a lifeless corpse. When my family wanted me to marry Huang Jiayuan, I agreed without the slightest bit of hesitation. Without you left in the world, there wouldn't be a difference regardless of who I married. On the day of my marriage, you suddenly appeared and brought about a gigantic explosion with you. You destroyed everything. Looking back, that feeling was truly mystical. Can you tell me why you disappeared back then? Ling Tian laughed bitterly. Ming'er took me away and we planned my revenge in secret. Ming'er's motive was to gain control of the Ling family. Up until the day of your wedding, I had always thought that she was the one who took care of me all those years and I agreed to help repay her the favor. Since there wasn't any meaning for me to remain alive at that time, I decided to fulfill her wishes. Thinking about it, Ming'er was definitely extremely bewildered about why I agreed to her plans so easily. Ling Tian laughed with self-mockery. Oh, no wonder. Li Zhu seemed to have come to a realization. No wonder all of those who were close to Ming'er did not come to my wedding. It turns out that she was the biggest winner of this event. The matters of the world are truly mystical. No, she truly deserves to be the biggest winner. She rendered you aid at the time when you needed it the most and I also made use of her identity to take care of you. Without her, you wouldn't have the chance to take your revenge. She deserved all of her rewards. I originally thought that everything would be over after my death. Who would have thought that the Yellow Springs Road truly exists and that I would meet you on there as well? And you actually said that you had forgiven me. Li Zhu's bitter expression was suddenly filled with joy and happiness. At that time, I was overjoyed and cried by the side of the road for a while. Following that, I heard you calling out my name and running past my side. Danj, ever since we were 13, that was the first time you called out my name. I had always been waiting for that day, waiting for the day when you forgave me. After waiting for such a long time, I finally heard your forgiveness. Even if I was only a soul, I wanted to be together with you. Danj, do you know that I almost exploded with joy when you called my name? I finally got to see such a day. At that time, I shouted out behind you but you didn't hear me. After you ran past me, you finally turned back to see me. After that, I saw that you wanted to run to me but were unable to do so. Then, you began spinning like a top before disappearing. I became extremely anxious but I was unable to find you. You weren't in front of me and I thought that you were behind me. However, I couldn't take a single step back and so I tried copying you by spinning on the spot. I never imagined that when I woke up, I would be in my mother's Wombo broken bar. Ever since I came into this world, I believed that you were definitely in this world as well. I really wanted to find you but I didn't dare to and was afraid. After hesitating time and time again, I decided to wait until my divine ice formula was completed before going to find you. At that time, I would be able to aid you at the very least. When I was young, I had always read novels of people transmigrating and knew the large benefits a transmigrator had. I knew that you would definitely shine brightly in this world as well. So, I hid in the depths of the mountains. I was truly afraid that if I appeared in this world, I wouldn't be able to control myself and would snatch your glory. I was afraid that you wouldn't love me anymore if I did that. I was even more afraid that you weren't even in this world a broken bar. I was extremely fortunate that the heavens did not give me an ugly appearance. I was also fortunate that you were truly in this world. The luckiest thing was the fact that we did not have any blood ties in this life. When I went out to pick herbs, I saw you being chased at a broken bar. I originally wanted to follow after you and never reveal my identity. I wanted to gain your approval to become your wife. Even if I could only become a concubine or a maid, I would be satisfied. However, you still managed to tell from my martial arts and movement techniques. Li Zhu looked at Ling Tian with love in her eyes and a tinge of resentment. But this pighead here actually asked me to find someone else to marry. While you actually go around womanizing with so many beauties. The most infuriating thing was the fact that you asked someone like me who has no status or title to comfort your beloved woman. You a broken bar, you are going to anger me to death. You still dared to beat me at such a spot and said that you were a bigger brother teaching your little sister a lesson a broken bar. Li Zhu began wailing and dived into Ling Tian's embrace. crying out all of her grievances from both of her lifetimes. Ling Tian immediately felt his heart surging and did not know what to feel. Looking at this beautiful lady reprimanding him while wailing, Ling Tian felt his heart aching. After missing her for a lifetime, would he still miss her again in this life? Could he have the heart to disappoint such a love for him? Since she had followed him into this world, just what should he do? Was he really going to allow her to marry someone else? Could he really bear to do so? Ling Tian let out a long sigh as he looked at the trembling beauty in his embrace. His arms, which were curled around her waist, tightened slightly. Li Zu let out a soft moan and immediately felt Ling Tian's strength. Lifting her head up, she looked at Ling Tian with a burning gaze. She then stood on her tiptoes and gave Ling Tian a kiss. With their lips connecting, Ling Tian immediately felt a tinge of saltiness from Li Zu's cooling lips. That was the taste of Li Zu's tears. Ling Tian's heart clenched up and he hugged Li Zu tightly, returning her kiss crazily. Li Zu's body trembled and she lay in Ling Tian's embrace with satisfaction. Shutting her eyes, tears silently rolled down the corner of her eye as a broken bar. A long while later broken bar, Ling Tian let out a long breath and said, "How sweet." In response, Li Zu's small fists hammered twice onto his chest to signify their master's whining. Following that, Ling Tian lowered his head again a broken bar. After a long time that was enough to suffocate a whaley broken bar. Li Zu struggled free from Ling Tian's embrace with her hair in a complete mess, her face flushed red, and breathing ragged. Her two proud peaks were trembling and her eyes were in a daze. One of her hands was placed on Ling Tian's chest weakly and her face was full of happiness. Ling Tian chuckled and Li Zu could feel Ling Tian's chest trembling slightly. With her face completely red, she hammered Ling Tian twice on his chest. If Ling Jian and the rest were to see the current Li Zu, they would definitely be startled. Was this gentle and tender lass really the demoness that everyone in the courtyard was afraid of? Ling Tian smiled and grabbed onto Li Zu's hand and placed it in his palm. He then stroked Li Zu on the forehead and said, "Xue, I am a little puzzled." Li Zu's body trembled and tears rolled down like rain. Ever since the two of them met in this world, Ling Tian had never called her Xue and had never used this name on anyone else. Take for example Zhai Yanzu. Even though her pet name was called Xue, Ling Tian had still changed it for her. Li Zu knew that even if all of the happenings of their previous life were forgotten by Ling Tian, it was still a thorn in Ling Tian's heart, a thorn which could not be plucked out. From the way he was unwilling to call her Xue, Li Zu could tell. Now, this name which Li Zu had not heard for a long time had finally left Ling Tian's lips again. This was enough to show that this knot in Ling Tian's heart was finally untied. Ling Tian had finally accepted her. Chapter 584, Arrogant Assassin. Li Zu wiped off her tears and forced a smile. "What are you puzzled about?" Her voice trembled like her agitated mood. How could Ling Tian not feel her trembling voice? He sighed tenderly in his heart and hurriedly changed the topic. "In our previous life, our world practices monogamy. Why would you not be conflicted about the idea of polygamy?" "Monogamy?" Li Zu let out a self-mocking smile. "Are you lying to ghosts, Danj? You are also someone who grew up in an aristocratic family. Did you really not know? Even if we are talking about the seniors of our previous life, how many of them only had a single wife? Almost all of the elders had a good 3 to 5 wives at the very least. Which one of them didn't have a few mistresses on the outside? Monogamy? Are you cracking a joke? Not to mention an aristocratic family like ours. It would be an embarrassment if a small boss didn't have at least one mistress. Even the small public security bureau officer would have a couple of girlfriends for sure." Li Zu chuckled. It wouldn't be easy to find a loyal husband even if he didn't have money or status. As for those with money and status or broken bar, I don't need to say anything more. Ling Tian smiled. "I am not talking about anyone else but you. Do you not have any thoughts?" Li Zu snorted and pinched Ling Tian on the arm before whining, Of course, I have my thoughts. But so what if I have my thoughts? Would you abandon your other lovers for me? Would you? You don't need to answer this question, and we all know the answer in our hearts. I won't mind, Li Zhu snorted. Besides, we are already in a different world where the strong would reign supreme. You are walking the path of the monarch, and if you only have a single wife, people would think that you are crazy. Ling Tian let out a long sigh of relief. This world is truly great. Li Zhu's eyes widened in anger, and she suddenly questioned angrily, be honest, could it be that you are fighting for hegemony just so you can set up a harem of 72 concubines and have a new concubine every night? No, Ling Tian said with a righteous look and shook his head seriously. How can this be possible? Am I someone like that? Besides, how could 72 concubines be sufficient? I need to have 3,000 beauties in my harem at least. I will bite you to death. I didn't use enough strength before, or otherwise how could you dare to be so arrogant? Li Zhu flew into a rage and pounced forward, brandishing her claws. You said you wouldn't mind. How can you bite me? I will bite you first. Woo woo, a broken bar. The two of them were biting each other. See no evil, hear no evil, and do no a broken bar. Just when Ling Tian was filled with the sweetness of springtime, Eastern Zhao was already engulfed in flames. Famine spread across the land with bitterness in the eyes of the people. Shenru, whose army had finally come into contact with Dongfang Jinglei, and he joined up with them. At this moment, Dongfang Jinglei was being chased after by the forces of the Eastern Zhao army, and he had less than 5,000 subordinates still alive. Following that, both parties did not say a single word and charged at each other in a chaotic battle. Shenru, whose purpose was simple, he wanted to create as huge of a mess as he could to buy some time for the troops at Sobbing Ghost Mountain. Since he wasn't willing to talk, he would make the battle as intense as possible. Only if the battle was intense would attention be drawn to their battle. Just when both parties were having a huge battle, Ling Tian was clad in a full set of black robes and snuck into Eastern Zhao territory. He was like a floating spirit and a sharp arrow, headed straight for the hinterlands of Eastern Zhao. His target was the temporary residence of the Eastern Zhao Emperor, Blazing Sun City. The temporary capital of Eastern Zhao, Blazing Sun City. The sun set in the west and the autumn winds rustled. The boundless darkness descended onto the continent again. Ling Tian, who was hiding in a shrub, had his usual calmness and was expressionless. His eagle eyes were locked on the imposing city gates before him. He was like a deity above the 9 heavens, gazing emotionlessly down on the world. During his current trip with Ling Tian, especially after he climbed up to the peak of the mountain with Ling Tian, he had received quite a bit of enlightenment. Even after he faced humiliation from Li Zhu, his sword Dao, which hadn't had the slightest bit of improvement lately, finally had signs of breaking through. Especially after he witnessed the tall peak that was once under his feet collapsing before his very eyes. In Ling Tian's heart, he also felt a large obstruction in his heart collapsing. There are only things which cannot be imagined, but not things which cannot be accomplished. From that moment on, Ling Tian felt his eyes lit up and his future was limitless. All the sword, blade, fist, and movement techniques that Ling Tian taught him in the past no longer had any mysteries to him. All of his previous doubts and questions had been cleared up in that single moment without any obstructions left behind. At that moment, Ling Tian was overjoyed and had a strange feeling of nirvana. Ling Tian could clearly feel that his martial arts had taken another large step forward. If he were to fight Li Zhu again, Ling Tian was confident that even if he wasn't able to beat her, he definitely wouldn't lose. This was a breakthrough in his mental state and also a restoration of his confidence. Ling Tian's confidence scaled up another level and reached entirely new heights. He had the confidence to challenge any expert in the world. On Ling Tian's skinny shoulders, the hilt of a sword could be seen sticking out. On top of it, a black sword tassel drifted around in the winds like it was the flag of a demon. As it drifted around, its ferocious teeth were revealed. Ling Tian finally climbed out of the shrubs, and his cold gaze was like an unbreakable sword, fixed on the dark distant city. Ling Tian sped across the wilderness like a wisp of green smoke. His cold gaze seemed to indicate endless bloodshed in Blazing Sun City. The night was no longer lonely. Even with Ling Tian's character, he couldn't help but feel his blood boil. In the past 10 years, Ling Tian led the first pavilion despite his young age, and his feats spread across the entire continent, from an unknown assassination organization to the current first pavilion. Furthermore, the prestigious might of the first pavilion head had spread across the continent. There wasn't a single person on the continent who didn't know about his name. However, no one knew that the leader of the #1 assassin organization was actually such a young youth. In the past 10 years, there were thousands who had died under Ling Tian's sword. The boundless killing had already thoroughly tempered Ling Tian's spirit. In Ling Tian's eyes, things that would shock ordinary people were no more than a daily occurrence to him. In this world, there weren't many things capable of making Ling Tian have a change in expression. At the same time, the people who Ling Tian cared about were as rare as phoenix's feathers and unicorn's horns. Regardless of how difficult the mission was, Ling Tian had never shrunk in fear or failed a mission. With regards to killing, regardless of who it was, Ling Tian had absolute confidence. The series of continuous victories he experienced over time had already bred a desire for victory which disdained everything else. Even when he faced Yu Manlu back then, Ling Tian charged forward with absolute confidence and would not be agitated in the slightest. Regardless of how powerful Yu Manlu was, he was no more than a family head of an aristocratic family. Even if this family head was more prestigious than all the monarchs of the world. However, he was still a family head after all. All of these years, there had been more than one family head who had died under Ling Tian's sword. Towards the title a family head, Ling Tian was already numb. Even though Ling Tian almost died in the Yu residence back then, the current him was far stronger. The Ling Tian of today would probably not fail again. There wasn't anyone in the world that Ling Tian did not dare to kill. The person who Ling Tian wanted to assassinate today was an even higher existence. He was the monarch of a nation, the ruler of Eastern Zhou, Dongfeng Mingre. This time, Ling Tian truly had a completely different feeling. The excitement that he rarely felt before killing someone had sprouted in his heart today. Ling Tian had killed all kinds of individuals before, from ordinary commoners to the prime minister of an empire. However, he had never killed the monarch of a nation. He originally had the chance to do so when massacring the Northern Wei imperial family. However, he missed the opportunity because he wanted to personally kill Wei Changping, and Ling Kai snatched the opportunity to kill the monarch of Northern Wei. Even though there wasn't any challenge in killing the Northern Wei monarch, however, the chance was currently in front of him. If he was able to successfully kill the Eastern Zhou monarch under the layers of protection by his guards, Ling Tian would definitely feel a strong sense of accomplishment. What Ling Tian chased after was the instant sense of accomplishment and the emptiness that followed after. It was only at that time when Ling Tian was the happiest. Just like how Ling Tian killed the powerful family head of the Dongfeng family with a single blow, Ling Tian could already imagine Dongfeng Mingre dying under his sword with his blood spurting in all directions and his head flying up into the sky before being caught by him. If this assassination could be completed successfully, Ling Tian's next target would be the #1 expert in the world, Justice. Borrowing the cover of the darkness, Ling Tian did not even need to pass through the city gates. As though there were invisible stairs by the city wall, Ling Tian flew up dozens of feet into the air. Like a black bird, he silently flew up the city walls before making use of the shadows to avoid the patrolling guards. After avoiding a dozen patrol squads, he then carefreely walked on the streets of Blazing Sun City. Blazing Sun City at night was completely silent, as though it was a dead city. Because night had just fallen, the night watchman had not come out. As compared to the bustling sky-bearing city, Bright Jade City, and Gold Jade City, Blazing Sun City was completely different. Occasionally, there would be a couple of patrol squads looking in Ling Tian's direction, and Ling Tian would casually hide in the shadows. There were even a few patrol soldiers who would brush by Ling Tian's sleeves but not notice him in the slightest. They never imagined that the most frightening assassin in the world was just a step away from them. If they were to find out about this, these soldiers would probably lose their sleep for the next couple of months. How is this any different from brushing past the god of death? During those few encounters, Ling Tian even made preparations to silence these soldiers. However, these soldiers were filled with laughter and conversation, not noticing Ling Tian in the slightest. This made the #1 assassin who wanted to kill extremely depressed. With such soldiers and patrol squads, Ling Tian felt that he could bring 10,000 soldiers in and they would not even notice it. They were short-sighted to the point they were almost blind. Or perhaps it could be said that they just couldn't be bothered. With the smoke of battle still rising to the skies, these guards were actually so relaxed and undisciplined. Ling Tian was astounded at his target. It wasn't difficult to train a bunch of elite soldiers. As long as one had the time and skill, one would be able to train up a bunch of troops to the embryonic form of elite soldiers. They would then require the baptism of a single battle and would become freshly minted elite troops. However, it was truly puzzling why Eastern Zhao would spend so much money and grain to train up an unruly mob. Even if one did not understand military discipline, they should not train up a bunch of pig-like soldiers, right? The military trainers of Eastern Zhao truly have some ability, Ling Tian praised in his heart. If those military trainers knew that they were able to receive the praise of the #1 assassin in the world, who knows if they would feel pride or grief. After strolling a couple of rounds in the city like a ghost, from the tightness of the security, Ling Tian could already determine that Dongfeng Mingri was currently in the city head mansion. Since the target was already located, Ling Tian began studying the geography of the place. He planned his route of advancement and also his route of retreat. There were truly many patrol squads in Blazing Sun City and there were a couple of times where Ling Tian's whereabouts were almost found. Such a feeling of being on edge was one that made Assassin Ling extremely uncomfortable. Thus, he might as well jump out in the open to take a look at the urban landscape of the city, to see what route he could take to the city head mansion, what retreat route he could take, where he could escape to if he was injured, where the dead ends were a broken bar. Should one praise Ling Tian for being bold because of his skill, or should one scold him for being foolishly bold? At the very end, Ling Tian had even taken his sword off his back to use it as a ruler. As he was measuring the distance, a patrol squad coincidentally passed by and the dim yellow lantern light shone onto Ling Tian's body. Ling Tian felt a tinge of depression in his heart and stood still without bothering to avoid the light in the slightest. With his mood being bad, it wouldn't be too bad of an idea to kill a few to vent his frustrations. As for alerting Dongfeng Mingri, it wasn't too big a matter. At the very most, it would be slightly more difficult for him to assassinate Dongfeng Mingri. However, it would also allow him to find the mythical feeling of hovering between life and death. Ling Tian held onto his sword and he looked at the approaching 20 or so soldiers with a pair of frosty eyes. His eyes grew colder as the troops approached and his sword about to leave its sheath. Right at this moment, something which was completely out of Ling Tian's expectation, which made Ling Tian not know whether to laugh or cry, happened. The leader of the patrol squad approached Ling Tian with his lantern. Seeing that Ling Tian did not avoid him in the slightest, together with Ling Tian being dressed in black, glaring at them ferociously with the overbearing manner of an expert, the leader looked at Ling Tian with shock. Just when Ling Tian was about to unsheath his sword, the patrol squad leader suddenly bowed down to Ling Tian respectfully. "It has been tough on sir." Ling Tian was dumbfounded and flew into a rage. "Do you recognize me?" "What, sir?" That leader bowed down and said in a soft voice, "Please appease your anger, sir. This subordinate will leave immediately." "I definitely wouldn't dare to disturb sir. May sir forgive us." Ling Tian was completely depressed and grabbed the leader by the sleeves and scolded, "Have you seen me before? Why are you so certain that I am your officer? Why are you so careless? Let me tell you, I am an assassin who is here to kill your monarch. Do you understand?" That leader laughed dryly and wiped off the sweat on his forehead. "Sir really knows how to joke a broken bar, he. Looking at sir's prestige, sir is definitely an expert among experts. How would we be so blind to mistake sir for an assassin? With sir present, how would there be any assassins? Please stop joking with us. If sir wants to find someone to joke with, this subordinate can find two beauties for sir." Ling Tian was dazed by the leader's words and released his sleeves. Ling Tian suddenly understood what the leader meant and roared with anger, "What nonsense are you talking about? Look at how spineless all of you are. Are you guys patrolling or taking a stroll? If you guys patrol the place in such a manner, What can you guys find? A bunch of B Street RDS. Even if an assassin was right before your eyes, you guys wouldn't be able to recognize him. Scram for me. Yes, yes, yes. This subordinate will scram immediately. This subordinate will scram a broken bar. He. He then bowed respectfully again before fleeing quickly. A sound of anger sounded from afar. FK. He dares to say that I am spineless. Isn't he a ball-ass eunuch, coming out every day to deceive people? He still wants to fool me, even if I am spineless. I am still much better than that ball-ass thing. He only knows how to harm little kids every day. He still has the cheek to reprimand us. Leader is wise. If not for leader's wisdom, we wouldn't know how to deal with that darn eunuch who likes to keep catamites or broken bar. That's right. That's right. Look at his deadpan face. Apart from the palace, where else can he come from? That fool still thinks that he can become a turtle after putting on a tortoise's shell. A broken bar. What a joke. Haha, a broken bar. A wave of laughter sounded. Eunuch, ball-less, keeping catamites, becoming a turtle after putting on a tortoise's shell? Exclamation mark. These words thoroughly enraged this number one assassin to the point his lips trembled and limbs turned cold. Is this what they think of me? Just when Ling Tian wanted to turn around to vent his anger, he could no longer find them. After throwing off Ling Tian, these fellows were afraid that the eunuch might end up asking them to find a catamite for him. In order to avoid trouble, they escaped quickly. At the very next intersection, a broken bar, Ling Tian snorted and his deadpan expression turned completely red from anger. In order to vent his anger, Ling Tian swung his sword down hard at the wall beside him. A series of footsteps sounded and another squad arrived. Seeing Ling Tian standing up proudly in the middle of the road, they were first taken aback before bowing down respectfully as though they saw a devil and quickly fled. Ling Tian laughed from extreme anger. Weren't the guards of the Blazing Sun City too preposterous? The patrol guards truly couldn't be blamed for their negligence. It was truly a problem of the Eastern Zhao Empire. Before Dongfeng Jinglei staged his rebellion, he had once sent a powerful swordsman to assassinate Dongfeng Mingri. This swordsman created huge chaos in the Eastern Zhao Palace, and it was also because of this chaos that Dongfeng Jinglei had the opportunity to chase the imperial family out of the imperial palace. The number of casualties that this swordsman caused was incalculable. The beauties of the imperial harem were largely weak and defenseless. In the face of a martial arts expert, they were naturally diced up like vegetables without the slightest bit of retaliation. Dongfeng Mingri's most beloved concubine was also killed on that night. As for the Eastern monarch Dongfeng Mingri, he also suffered heavy injuries from the incident. After this assassination incident, a huge alarm bell went off in Dongfeng Mingri's head. Dongfeng Mingri truly realized that in the face of a martial arts expert, the defenses of his imperial palace were truly lacking. Being chased out of his capital had become the biggest humiliation of Dongfeng Mingri's life. As the monarch of a nation, he was treated like a traitor and escaped like a dog without a house. How could he ever endure such a humiliation? As for the reason, Dongfeng Mingri naturally understood that the successful rebellion was because of the chaos created by the assassination. From that day on, Dongfeng Mingri hated the word assassin to the bone and was also filled with caution. Ever since he moved into Blazing Sun City, Dongfeng Mingri began a series of anti-assassination operations. He would instruct the experts of his palace to dress up as a black-masked man, roaming around the streets to test the wariness of the soldiers. Thus, these soldiers would always be on edge, afraid that they would miss an assassin. This was also a form of practice to prepare for the unexpected. Naturally, the experts of the imperial palace were reprimanded fiercely by Dongfeng Mingri for allowing the assassin to enter the palace without anyone knowing. As such, these experts vented their anger on the soldiers and resented them for being useless. With regards to them being punished for the soldiers' dereliction, all of them were filled with rage. Now that they received a command from the emperor to pose as an assassin, they naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity to take revenge for their grievances. In the past few days, with the excuse of it being an exercise, They tortured the whole Imperial army badly. There were even some experts who had some deficit to their bodies and were screwy in the head. They caught some of the better looking soldiers to tease them, and the entire Imperial army was filled with a grievance but had no place to vent it. After this continued for a really broken bar. Every time the soldiers saw a young man clad in black, they would avoid them like the plague, with Ling Tian acting as though he was causing trouble, standing in the alley openly while waving his sword at a broken bar. When had they ever seen such an arrogant assassin? Thank you for your continued following. Please support us by subscribe to encourage our continued creation. And press the bell to notify new chapter from us. Thank you.